listening to Reset Race. You're now tuned in to Reset Race. You're listening to Reset Race. You're now tuned in to Reset Race. What? Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Back on the grill again. We grilling them. You're listening to Reset Race. ADOS need reparations to make America great. You're tuned in to Reset Race. We no longer starving while others eat off our plate. No. You're listening to Reset Race. We focused on our justice claim. We know what is at stake. You're tuned in to Reset Race. You'll find out who really about justice and really who fake. Lineage go back to US Southern plantations. Lineage, Jim Crow and mass incarceration. Redlining lynchings. We are old from this nation. You're not about justice if you ain't for reparations. MG the wise one. Cousin mother intellectual. Samantha bringing fire. Anti-black we pressing you. No permanent friends and no permanent enemies. The backbone of the country to win. You need our energy. You gon' see. Listening to Reset Race. You're now tuned in to Reset Race. You're listening to Reset Race. You're now tuned in to Reset Race. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Back on the grill again. We grilling them. You're listening to Reset Race. ADOS need reparations to make America great. You're tuned in to Reset Race. We no longer starving while others eat off our plate. No. You're listening to Reset Race. We focused on our justice claim. We know what is at stake. You're tuned in to Reset Race. You'll find out who really about justice and really who fake.
Welcome to Reset Race. MG has left us to be a good husband, have a good evening with his beautiful wife. So we are here tonight with the fuck shit. Yeah, I'm starting off early. So tonight's video is the Jacobin show, which is, you know, Jacobin, the We Hate Nigger channel on YouTube. They might as well just change their name to that. And the uses and abuses of history with Adolph Reed is the name of this video. I am Sam, aka the Khaleesi. After watching this video, I had to reach out to our good whites and invite them to come on the show so they can remind me why I shouldn't teach my children when they grow up to hate y'all and to plan the overthrow of your lives. But thank goodness for the good white people in the chat and Gabriel showed up. So we're gonna go through this because I called a couple people on this show and I literally said after watching this video, I wanted to just come in and be like, the white left is doomed, the country's doomed. That's the end of my TED Talk. But I know that that's not constructive and I can't just cast all of y'all to the wolves. But after watching this video, if this is how the majority of the country feels, then, you know, we can march to death together. So that's about how I feel. And we're going to do guests first. So first up is Gabriel. Welcome, Gabriel.
It is my pleasure, I think. I'm laughing now. I don't know why. I saw what that man said. Ooh.
You got to introduce yourself, Gabriel. You got to say hi.
I'm tripping. I'm sorry. I'm being speechless.
I know.
Anyone who hasn't watched this material, you know, I think they'll find it surprising if they pay attention. I'm so pleased to be on the show. Thank you all so much. My name's Gabriel Piemonte. I've been active on Twitter as a reparationist for quite some time, specifically aligned with the argument that Native Black Americans have a unique justice claim, and that's when we talk about reparations, that's what we're talking about. Other folks also have claims, but that reparations is a very specific redress that requires absolute top priority in policy and in terms of any claims that people have to make on the federal government or anywhere else. I'm also the founder of something called the Italian American Heritage Society of Chicago. So I have a very specific idea about how white people need to deal with our place in this strange matrix, which is pretty specific to white people with an ethnic heritage that they can refer back to, because I think there's reconstruction that has to happen. I kind of feel like there's a large group of people who are many, many generations in the United States, perhaps German, Swiss, Danish. They may be on their own. I don't have a solution for it. I don't know what they're going to do. For the purposes of this, I'll say this, for the purposes of this conversation, I also identify politically and in terms of policy as a social democrat, which is different from a socialist and different from a democratic socialist and different from any sort of contemporary American idea of socialism that I can see, because I think, and we're going to get into this, I think tonight, I think that when people talk about socialism in America today, it's a brand. And I think it more or less means centrist Democrat, but with like cool outfits and kind of identifying with the friendliest, coolest looking Congress people. But other than that, I don't see any difference. It's socialism, but we only want, $15 an hour jobs, and it just doesn't align with the traditional idea of socialism. And again, I think we're going to see some of that tonight. And so that's me introducing myself. I suppose the rest of you don't need any introduction with this audience, but how y'all doing tonight? Or today, or whenever it is. Time, there is no time, so I don't even know.
Go ahead, Killmonger.
All hail King Killmonger. My fellow Americans, it is I, Josiah, the Killmonger. I'm here to expose how the lefties go mask off, including the...
Hood on, mask off, hood on. Sorry, go ahead.
That is correct. Mask off and hood on. These folks, everything that they've been telling you all this time has been leading to this. And it's time that you accept the fact that we were right about these people this entire time. So let's talk about it.
They call me Mud. You can find me on all my social media, Twitter, Instagram, Clubhouse, @oflineage. Also, I am the creator of Bitter Dose TV. We're going to discuss, the Jacobin Klan again. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into the show.
Klan with a K. All right, let's just go. Fuck it.
So I actually want to go back to the big thing about history, Walter, because I know that you've been sitting on this for a little while, and I think it's really interesting. So you had sort of mentioned, before your idea that we should basically forget about history, or there's a time and a place for us to forget about history. And I think that your point that, if you're poor now, it doesn't really matter how you came to be that way. We should alleviate the poverty. I would 100% agree with that. Now, that said, Adolf, something that I find really useful about your work is that you often utilize or refer to history in a way that I think provides a lot of clarity on where our politics right now should go. And actually, I should say, one of our favorite guests on the show to date has been Touré Reed, who, of course, you both know. And I think that kind of at the height of the liberal hysteria around was the New Deal racist, he did something really useful and interesting, which was that he broke down exactly what the social and political and economic forces were that led to the creation of, say, Social Security or redlining, in a way that I think points us toward universalist reclamation or expansion of public goods rather than what the liberals have been advocating for. Right. So this is a long-winded way of, saying, Walter, when is it that we should ignore history? And Adolf, when is it actually useful to invoke it?
Okay. Yeah, so if you want to do just a quick, just theoretical version would be history is useful because knowing the truth is useful. History is completely useless when your claim to social justice is founded on some causal account of how you were victimized, right? So you can do it more specifically than that, but
coming from a person who comes from oppressors, Who wants to go first? Since history doesn't matter, who would like to go first? Because we don't want to talk about history doesn't matter, because if you're poor anyways because of some oppression, not some oppression, 3 genocides. So if you're poor because of 3 genocides done to you in this country, it doesn't matter because nobody cares about how you got here. But even though you are the poorest of the poor, we want you to take these social programs that we're not going to tell you what are, but we're going to say it's socialism. And you just take this, and this shit'll make you stable poor, and you can shut the fuck up. That's what I hear. All right, who wants to go first?
I think you just said it all. Like, I mean, that's basically what this is. It doesn't take into consideration that people might have politics that are invested in what happened in their history. That's for sure. He just assumes that everyone has the same goal as far as making socialism work so that the people on the bottom can be stable poor. But some of us are looking at this like we have been locked out of participating in this society like everyone else has. So that is kind of our goal. It's not that we are against the idea of the safety nets and all that, but we want to make sure that we're fixed. That's our main concern at this point. And I'm talking about. Go ahead, Sam.
No, we have to forget about history, because if you forget about history, we'll forget every time that we've decided, fuck this race shit. Let's align with the white people. Let's do this union shit. Let's come together as working people. And they got something and they pushed us the fuck out. Let's ignore all of that shit and pretend like their grandchildren will be different. Please keep going, Mud. I'm sorry.
I mean, yeah, there's that part. And I don't know, like they have not realized that this shit that they're doing is not working because they probably want to just ignore history. They want to ignore what happened in 2020. They want to ignore what happened in 2016 and not take any of that into account going forward, because they might have to deal with the fact that Black people are not buying into this bullshit.
So the question specifically, my Black son, okay, I know you're scared to say Black. I know you're scared to say reparations, because it seems like every time.
Ma'am, I don't think that's a fair
I'll let you
statement.
finish as well. But it seems like every time we talk about Black people and us getting something for the systematic oppression and exploitation of our people, we have to include every other person of color. So today, can we please talk about specifically Black people and reparations?
We're not going to take it.
This is their attempt at wrestling the left away from Black people and giving it over to the whites. Doesn't matter what kind of whites. You can be a little racist, you can be a little Nazi-ish, but we're not dealing with your liberal issues anymore. We only want to deal with these quote unquote class issues now. You're holding us back at this point. And what was it that Walter said? He said, history has no bearing on the need for social justice. Then where does the need for social justice come from? I mean, like, if I bomb your country today, does that mean tomorrow everything's good now?
Yeah, that's brilliantly put.
I just don't understand this concept. But please, somebody else take it, because I'll ramble.
I understand it. Go ahead, Gabriel, please.
No, go ahead,
I
Sam.
understand. And I'm just saying, I understand the concept. And this shit right here is radicalizing. Like, this is the thing. White people keep talking about how we need to de-radicalize Nazis and how we need to de-radicalize white supremacists. What y'all gonna do to de-radicalize within this when we get on point? Because I keep saying this, I'm a suburban Negro. I grew up in the United Nations. I didn't grow up in the hood. Like, I had white people problems, okay? Even though my mama worked, so yes, I was raised by my babysitter, but again, I was raised by my babysitter. I didn't like stay at home by myself. I wasn't a latchkey kid. I still had a fucking babysitter. Like, I had somebody who my mama paid for me to stay with. So I grew up in the suburbs. Y'all are pissing me the fuck off. And the worst part is my fate is not tied to how this plays out. I'm going to be okay. And I'm still fucking angry. What's going to happen when people who the only way that they know they're going to survive is for this to work? Y'all are worried about the wrong people being radicalized. Go ahead, Gabriel.
Yeah, no, that's just that's so brilliantly framed. And I think, this is that all put together, that's really, it pierces the argument. If the argument was ever meant to be taken seriously in the first place, I feel like a lot of this is a holding pattern. It's just kind of creating distraction while the powerful people in this country extract as many resources as possible before they set all of it on fire. But to the extent we're having a serious conversation, I think, you just kind of captured it perfectly. On the one hand, it is not only illogical, but silly to say that history is not important, because history is literally everything that happened just before this moment in time. So you're not having an adult conversation with us. You're taking an idea, using a kind of cartoon version of it, and saying, at some random interval that I, white man with some kind of position of authority, will determine from this point backwards, that stuff won't matter. I promise you, if I smash that man's windshield while he's having that interview and he walks outside and it's smashed, if I say to him, it's cool, it's the end of history. So that it doesn't matter I smashed your windshield. It's all the present tense. He's going to call the police on me, because history is relative to his interpretation of it. History matters if that dude has tenure. I do not know if he does or doesn't. But let's say whatever little community college he runs his mouth at for money has given him tenure, and you say, sorry, dude, we thought maybe social justice should be taught by people who know something about social justice based on their own experience. He won't want to hear your tenure doesn't matter anymore. He'll be like, I got tenure 5 years ago. So history does matter to everybody very much. That argument is just silly, but it's exactly, I think, as you're explaining it, Sam, it's like it's the wrong target. I think it's the wrong target on purpose. I think it's intended to be a distraction, and I believe I think the thesis is strong, that you're like, this is about the white people. They don't know what to do when the black people are radicalized, so they're just not going to worry about that right now, because really all they need is for elections to keep going the way they're going long enough for there to be nothing left of the American culture. And whatever happens after that is not their interest or problem. They don't, they're not thinking any further ahead than that. They'll be very happy to turn over the whole country to black folks once they've destroyed it. Once it's literally the entire country's burning instead of 20 or 25% of it, which is basically what's happening now, then they'll be like, you're right, we believe in justice as well. Take this steaming pile of dog shit and we're equal. We're all fair and square. We're going to be in the Caribbean. We're going to extract some more resources from someone else. You look at the pattern, and that's what it is. What's offensive about this kind of stuff is they present it as if they care about social justice, as if they care about people. The conversation we need to have is, why doesn't the left recognize its own sociopathology? Why do white people who think that they are progressive and left-leaning, not recognize that they are not capable of the emotional imagination that's required to be just a basic human being? And if you can't do that, if I can't see somebody stub their toe and part of my brain says, that hurts when that happens, when I stub my toe, I can imagine what that's like. If you've lost that ability, if you're always kind of jostling people when you're walking down the street, and even your little stuff indicates, if your kids are like robots, if you have no relationship with any of your family members, you need to work on that stuff and stop acting like you have a theory of the world that's going to help anybody else. And I think that's really where these people need to be. They don't need to be on YouTube. They need to be in therapy, and they need to stop talking like they know anything when they can very comfortably sit back and say all of the pain that other people have suffered is really unimportant. And they are all nodding at each other and saying, ooh, very deep, very interesting. It's a lot of bull. They're crazy. They need a re-education camp. And they better be careful because they're going to get it. What's going to happen is, Sam, like you're saying, what happens when you radicalize the black folks, you don't need to be in the majority to be in power. And 18, 19% of a population is plenty to take over. What are you going to do?
All you need is 3% for a revolution. There's
That's
articles,
all you need.
papers have been written, 3%. And
If
on
Doc
top
was
of
here,
that,
I'm sure he'd agree with you.
and on top of that, another way for us to be radical is y'all can't win a revolution without Negroes. All Negroes got to do is stay home and serve the new master. Because both right now, the left is racist and the right is racist. So at the end of the day, they both hate us. So why do we care which new master we serve? We've been doing that shit in this country for hundreds of years. Fuck them.
I've never heard the kind of focused conversation on black folks as I'm hearing now in terms of like, why not conservatism? You know, why not just go with the Republicans for a generation and see what happens? It's always been there, and there's always been conservative black folks, of course, but we're talking about electoral politics. And I think, you know, more than ever, I think there's folks that are like, why wouldn't we? What's the argument against?
So I'm not there yet, but I see a lot of people leaning right. I think 2024, y'all better watch out for the blacks. Like people were having a fit when they lied and said, hold on, let me turn on my camera. People were having a fit when they lied and said that black people went 10% per Trump. We were still under the double digits, and that includes non-Black American descendants of chattel slavery. A lot of foreign blacks are Republicans. What they gonna do when descendants of chattel slavery go right? And that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that's the answer, because they're racist too, but both sides are fucking up and neither side is serving us. And a lot of people just want to see this shit burn down. I don't want to see it burn down. I would like to see a good world for everybody else and my children. Like I would like to see the people I care about make it through the Hunger Games. I would like for there not to be a Hunger Game. But this shit right here, the way this shit's going, like lower income white people, poor white people, these middle class and upper class whites are leading you to your destruction. That's good word. I have to choose my words carefully. Woo, let's get back to this video because we ain't got through 5 minutes. Let's go. Let's get back to the video. We'll come back around because they keep saying shit. So, whew. All right, let's go.
But you know the things you're talking about with Teray and the New Deal. Totally, it's completely useful to have people stop saying things which are false, especially if those things that they're saying that are false are helping them make their points. So even I, as anti-historicist as I've become, you know, I am going around saying, you know, Marx should have said, it wasn't enough to say, you know, if the philosophers have only understood the world, the point was to change it.
What is false that people are saying about the New Deal? The New Deal was racist. It was set up to carve out Black people. Yes, some poor whites got fucked up in the process, but like my white lady friend Edie, who y'all have heard on here come on the show plenty of times, explained to me, her family member who got excluded because of farm work went and was able to get a white job with the New Deal program and still get the benefits. So those white farmers were able to move into other programs. They didn't have to stay farmers. They could quit being farmers and go do something else in the New Deal and get those fucking benefits. Black people couldn't do that shit. So quit fucking playing us.
I mean, yeah, that's the whole thing. They want to act like just because people don't sit there and give like very nuanced details in describing how we were locked out, that means that we weren't exactly locked out because the government didn't specifically say Black people can't get these benefits. And it's bullshit because they know, like, when a program is set up to disproportionately hurt us, they understand that concept. Because they make the same argument, but in the inverse when they talk about the universal programs disproportionately benefiting us.
That's right.
So, like, this is just bullshit.
Facts. Like, facts. Anybody else before we get back? I know I stopped it kind of soon, but I just get so tired of that. And like, what's frustrating for me is like, my friend Edie is a big New Dealer. She completely believes in the New Deal. And all she says is, you know, Sam, I would like the New Deal without the racism. Why can't y'all just say that?
Right. Just admit it. I mean, there's documentation where Southern congressmen were like, you know, I'm not agreeing to this until you prevent these jobs that overwhelmingly are done by black folks to be separated out from the New Deal.
It seems to me, concessions to or dealings with the Congress, the legislature, which was dominated by racist Democrats from the South.
Now, on the eve of the inauguration, the month before, in February 1933, Walter Lippmann, the most important columnist in the country, wrote 7 columns in the Herald Tribune in which he counseled President Roosevelt that it would be necessary to suspend Congress if the emergency of the collapse of the economy were to be addressed. And the last few paragraphs of the great inaugural speech, the one in which the president told us we had nothing to fear but fear itself, the end of that speech, the president said, I will ask the Congress to do A, B, and C, and if they do not, I will ask for the one remaining capacity that I will need, the right to rule by executive power. But he never did that. The country never had that happen. Executive capacity grew, but it did not bypass Congress. Even the 100 days, the great legislative torrent that set the country on a new path in the first period of the Roosevelt presidency, occurred in the Congress, and the Congress often inserted items in that legislation the president himself did not want. We never lost that centrality of the legislature. But ironies on top of ironies involved in the story. As you note, the Democratic Party was a strange bedfellows institution. Northern liberals like Robert Wagner of New York, Southern racists like Theodore Bilbo of Mississippi. And after 1938, a majority of Democrats in Congress were from the 17 states in the Union that practiced mandatory racial segregation. So one of the questions I placed front and center in the book was, well, what difference did that make? We kept legislative government. We kept lawmaking. We kept democracy. But we did so in a Faustian bargain that linked modern American democracy and its remaking to the least liberal, least democratic part of the American polity.
Because of legislature, shall I call it supremacy, or because in your own thinking, we happily enough did not find Franklin Roosevelt executing or calling upon those final supreme presidential powers?
It's such a complex matter and fascinating. Lawmaking occurs through a complex process in the legislature. The masters of that process were Southern Democrats. Why? They came from a one-party system. They didn't have opposition. They had great seniority. They had massive experience. They often occupied the central leadership posts. The president, in going to Congress, in submitting legislation to Congress, in not doing what Lippmann had proposed, suspending Congress, had no choice but to work within the legislature in a manner as dictated by the leaders of congressional committees, the Speaker of the House, the Majority Leader, and the full complement of Southerners in the House and the Senate who truly dominated the institution. And in consequence, nothing could pass into law against their opposition in the 1930s and 1940s. And after 38, when they constituted a majority of the party, I go so far as to claim that everything that passed into law mapped almost precisely onto the preferences of the American South. But these white Southern representatives were not conservatives in the sense of today's conservatives. They came from a dirt poor region. They liked the New Deal. Bilbo, the leading racist in the Senate, campaigned as a 100% New Dealer. But all that depended on keeping race off the national agenda and of making sure that the South maintained its autonomy in matters of race.
You make certain that the reader knows that FDR was aware of this.
Yes.
And that FDR was aware of what you call the Faustian bargain. And that even in the matter of an anti-lynching bill, he would not speak up for it because of what that would have done to his support in the South.
I think that's quite correct. President Roosevelt, unlike his wife, was, one might say, indifferent to these questions. He wasn't
indifferent?
Indifferent. He wasn't a racist, although he spent a lot of time in the South, but indifferent in the sense that it wasn't high on his priorities to crusade to try to change the racial order.
But now, wait a minute. What I get from
Yes.
from reading your book is that he had no option. If he were to be successful in his New Deal legislation, and then most importantly, later in his war activities, he was going to had no choice but to go along with the South.
No, that's quite right. Your reading is an accurate reading of the book. He had no choice, but sometimes we find ourselves in circumstances of no choice, and we deeply regret and resent not having had the choice. In the case of President Roosevelt, I don't think he saw it quite that way. Eleanor did, but not Franklin.
Why do you say that?
You
take no pleasure in saying that.
No, I take absolutely no pleasure. I think in that manner, I don't even mean it. Of course, it's retrospectively a critical comment, but it's a critical comment on the much wider milieu of American politics and society at that moment. I think it was true that the great majority of Northern, non-Southern political actors in Congress, in the executive branch, and elsewhere, not all, but almost all, took the Southern system as if a fact of nature. It's the way it was. Even a Republican president, William Howard Taft in 1909, in the midst of one of the most boring inaugural addresses in American history, spoke in the middle paragraphs that leap off the page when one reads it to explain how it's no longer the business of the federal government to be concerned with Southern race relations. This matter is now settled. And he spoke at just the moment when the Southern states had completed their legal regime that came to be called Jim Crow. And Franklin Roosevelt grew up within that world. Both major parties at the time thought that race was not legitimately on the agenda of the federal government.
You know, as someone who grew up then, and I concede that FDR was my hero.
And mine.
Well, you're a lot younger. I lived through Bilbo. He was very real to me and to the other racists. I find it very difficult to really to wrap myself around your description of FDR.
I think FDR was appalled, as many Southerners were appalled, by the Bilbos, who were the rhetorical racists, who spoke of mongrelization, who not only spoke in the most despicable terms about African Americans, but about Jews and other minorities. They were shameless in their speech. Many Southerners, most Southern representatives in Congress, were appalled and ashamed at that level of speech. But as one, the Southern members of Congress, including the most liberal, like one of my heroes, Claude Pepper of Florida, never, not once, spoke against segregation. Indeed, in 1948, when President Truman so courageously desegregated the military, Pepper spoke to his constituents and said, don't misunderstand, the President of the United States is not in favor of ending segregation in daily life in the South. So this was the normal character of speech and expectations in American life. And one could really find very, very few political leaders who were sufficiently angered and appalled to lead any kind of effort or crusade against it.
Tell me, it must occur to many people reading Fear Itself, there is some connection that you might draw between FDR and the Southern Democrats and his relations with them, and President Obama and the Tea Party and present Republicans.
Well, analogies are tricky across time.
Okay, fair enough.
You began by asking about a description of whether I think like a political scientist, and now I want to assert I'm thinking like a historian, and thinking about differences and similarities, but also the differences. The Tea Party would not exist if not for the most radical change in recent American politics, the shift of the South from Democratic to Republican. But in that shift, there was a movement away from a majority of Southern members of Congress and political leaders being, in some sense, liberals. Liberals in terms of social and economic policy, pro-Social Security. Southerners voted for the Wagner Act. Southerners voted for the National Industrial Recovery Act, for a stronger and larger federal government, for more taxes and redistribution. The South was dirt poor. They were not conservatives in the same sense that an anti-government Tea Party is, with one big exception. By the 1940s, the Southern members of Congress had figured out that if a national labor movement grew strong, the racial order of the South might collapse. And the moment the Southerners departed from the consensus of the Democratic Party was the moment they realized that they must act with Republicans to limit the capacities of organized labor. And the key moment of that came in 1947 with the passage of the Taft-Hartley Act, two Republicans writing that act with nearly unanimous Southern Democratic support against the veto, overturning the veto of President Truman. And that's the moment where a kind of Tea Party shift begins to occur. But today, of course, President Obama faces not a circumstance of members of his own party resisting some features of his politics, but the other party in a system of divided government. Whereas with the exception of 2 years, in the 20-year period of Roosevelt and Truman, there were significant Democratic Party majorities. But then, in effect, we had a three-party system.
Indeed.
Northern Democrats, Southern Democrats, and Republicans. And the outcome in issue after issue, including matters of foreign policy and war and peace, often to the good as well as not just to the bad, depended on the decisions taken by the segregationist wing.
Nobody's saying don't do the New Deal. We're saying do the New Deal without the racism. We're saying that's still not reparations. You still got to pay reparations. This is my thing, right? Why are you white leftists pitting universal programs against you paying for 3 genocides that you owe to Black Americans? Why are they mutually exclusive? Why is it that you can't pay my debt and take care of your people, but at the same time you keep telling me that MMT is the thing that can save us all, but it just doesn't work for Black people? I don't understand this. Help me understand, because I'm just a stupid bitch with a culinary degree. So help me understand, because all these academics, no, for real, I'm just an ex video girl with a fucking culinary degree. You know, go fucking make some food. I know shit about shit. I just used to read 60 books a year. But that still doesn't make me anybody, because I don't have a blue check and I don't have a PhD. So explain it to the dummy. Speak dummy for me to make this make sense. How you gonna give me the same shit as everybody else, but my people are poorer than anybody else? So we the poorest of the poor, but you're gonna give us all the same, but you still not gonna give me enough to be good. Fuck you. Like, y'all ain't even giving us enough to even think about selling out for reparations. That's the gag, right? Like, y'all ain't even brought nothing to the table for niggas to be like, well, we could use reparations, but like everything you talking about, we still gonna be poor. So we like, well, y'all suffering, y'all can't feed y'all babies, y'all shit fucked up. Yeah, sounds about good to us. Come on, welcome to the bottom. Go ahead. Anything else?
Yeah, like it's just The only time we get class collaboration amongst the America's whites is for racist purposes. That's the only time America's whites come together. It's the only thing they care about that much. So like, when it comes to these whole like white people leading the left, like you can't do it without us. And it's not because we are like so much more savvy than you politically. It's because when you guys gather together, the only thing you can do is oppress other people.
Right.
Think about it. Like an Italian guy, a white
Right.
South African guy. What are y'all gonna talk about? What do y'all have? What do y'all have in common? Y'all have nothing. Y'all are not the same people. Y'all are not even genetically similar. No more genetically similar than you would be to me.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing you have in common is a group of people you're not at that point.
Exactly.
If you're trying to
Like,
do
it's-
something together. Yeah, I completely agree with that. First of all, the idea that none of these so-called socialists are willing to do a power analysis, which read any revolutionary theory, read any one you like, pick your favorite, and it all says first you got to know who needs what before you can start to talk about how power is distributed. That is the fundamental, and they will do anything but. And I have said this on Twitter, I've said this in personal conversations, I have said this in other places, and they will dance around that all day long in this context. In any other context, they'll be like, oh, you're right. And of course, the black and brown people, woo, 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 BIPOC, woo, woo, woo. But they won't, if you say, do the actual math, and this is where it is, then they don't want to talk. It's real simple. All the stuff, I believe, it's come down to this. It just follow the pattern. All the stuff that you would, if you were just blindfold, I'm going to give the workout to the people who have the most expertise. What are we talking about in the academy? We're talking about all of the stuff around racial justice, all the stuff around American history, all the Black history kind of stuff. That's going to Black folks. You nations giving millions and billions of dollars to programs to help Black and brown communities. All of that's now going to go to Black folks because those folks have the expertise and the experience. Liberal white people are going to lose a whole chunk, probably half of the white liberal middle class depends on having jobs they are not the most qualified for. That's just a fact. I mean, you think about, okay, so Ira Katz Nelson, I love him. His writing is great. He's a good speaker. Why is he not a Black man?
But he's a racist apologist, though. If you listen to him, though, he'd be like, well, for the time,
Yeah. Nobody's perfect.
We tortured some folks.
Some folks got killed. That stuff happens. We got to move forward because he's got his book deal. There are so many examples like that. Like, why does the Ford Foundation never fund anything that comes to anything? With all the money they spend, why can you not say, and the Black community in Georgia has a median income of $85,000 a year per person and savings of $500,000. They should have done something with all that money. It's about being very carefully gatekeeping. And I don't want to get too far into the non-native Black American conversation. I just avoid that because I think it's not my business. But I do notice who gets these jobs and who doesn't get these jobs. And so I think it's you just look at patterns. And like, to me, the simplest explanation is the one that makes sense. And I've just known too many people in the foundation circles, in the academic circles. And it's like, white liberals are real nice to you until you start being qualified for their job.
Oh, like Rachel, is it Rachel Nichols from ESPN? Who as soon as it was time to give the Black chick who was more qualified, who was actually better at the job, she was like, I understand it's affirmative action, but you don't take my job.
Hosting the NBA Finals, so what did you do Doris' salary reporter job for the NBA Finals? Because guess what that was clearly away for? next deadline for Maria to do the hosting for us next week. So, I have declined. I don't know what their next move is, but they are feeling pressure because of all of that, and I'm trying to figure out like how to just, my thing is that I wish Maria Taylor all the success in the world. She covers football, she covers basketball. If you need to give her more things to do because you're feeling pressure about your crappy one-time record on diversity, which by the way I myself know personally from the female side of it, go for it. Just, find it somewhere else. You're not gonna find it with me.
But this bitch is married to Katie Couric's son or some shit. She's married into a fucking Anchor Dynasty or some shit. Fuck you. Right. And the same thing with the bitch who was talking about she cussed out Denzel thinking that was gonna be a win, who's getting dragged on the fucking internet. Tony Yvette did a video a couple years ago where they were talking about how Tone Talks and Yvette Carnell, it's on the Breaking Brown channel, where they're talking about how the Democratic Party is chasing the ghost of white voters. Listen, white people, you motherfuckers are divided. Most white people vote for Republicans. The only reason we're swinging to the other side is because of the blacks voting at 90% and those handful of your so-called people of color who fuck with you. Because only 30-40% of them go Republican too. Listen, to defeat you, I don't have to get black people from 90 to 40. I just have to get black people from 90 to 70 and you're done. Yeah. If we don't come out and vote for you, you don't win. So quit talking to me about white people being the majority. It doesn't matter that they're the fucking majority. They are not the base in the winning vote. So until you do right by me, fuck you, fuck your socialism, fuck your programs. And get this straight. I am not against universal programs, but you're not going to keep pitting them against reparations. What you owe me is a debt for 3 genocides. Not discrimination, genocide. There's a difference. Nobody's asking for reparations because you called my grandma a nigger. Okay? That's not what we fighting for. 3 genocides. Stop comparing me with people who just got here. And when you say, oh, well, there's rape and there's murder, then go get reparations from your own fucking country. Because they're the people who are letting that shit happen to you in your country. And if our country fucked up your country gotta sue this country. Have fun in the UN like our nigga asses are, because we ain't getting shit from the UN neither. They had a whole fucking meeting about racism, reparations, and the UK and the US said, fuck you, we ain't coming. So everybody got to start holding their own nuts and doing their own shit. But at the end of the day, Black Americans are the base. And somebody told me Biden's down 18 points with Black people. 2022 is going to be a fucking blue fucking red wedding. There's going to be blue blood everywhere. And I'm here for it. Do I want this country to go right? No. But y'all are crazy. Y'all ain't doing nothing for me and my people except telling us to shut the fuck up and stay at the bottom. No, we're fine. We know how to survive with nothing. I'm about to start teaching my people how to survive to get through this. We've gotten through worse. We have survived everything. We survived fucking slavery. We survived fucking white racial terrorism. We survived fucking smallpox. We survived every fucking thing. I'm going to teach my people how to survive this. I hope y'all are teaching y'all, because y'all, the way this is playing, if you don't want to team up with us, you don't want to do nothing with us, I don't care if you and your babies die. Fuck your kids. Fuck your kids. I mean that shit. If you don't care about me and my babies, fuck you and your kids. But it's going to help everybody. No, we're still going to be stable poor, because you have not listed anything that is going to make poor whites in Appalachia not be poor whites in Appalachia anymore. We got less money than them, because at least they own the land that those trailers stand on. We ain't even got that. So we can rock. But if y'all want to play chicken, Black people, we're built for this. We're stronger than you. It's in our blood. Struggle, pain. It's who we are. Y'all ain't built for this. All right, should we get back to the video? Or anybody got anything else? I'm just saying, y'all ain't built for this. Y'all don't want this real fight because we'll sit this one out. I think for the first time in this country, I think Black people should just sit one out. Let the whites fight it out.
It would change everything.
Let the whites figure it out. You know, let the whites and these new people that you keep bringing in, that you keep saying, you know, are the same as us and, you know, deserve everything that we deserve while you're giving us nothing. Let those people fight for you. We ain't doing it no more. I'm done being a mule. Shit, if I'm gonna be a mule, I better get paid for that shit. Don't drug mules get paid? How Black people run around here being mules and we don't get paid? We just the wrong kind of mule. All right, I'm gonna play this some more. Motherfuckers. Ooh, I feel good. I'm not even like super being hyper tonight because I feel calm and collected. I just feel like fuck y'all. Fuck you, fuck your baby, fuck your grandmama, fuck your racist ass grandmama.
It's that, yeah, the bourgeois historians have only understood the past or known the past. The point, however, is to forget it. So I agree, however, that actually you can't just forget the past in the sense that, no, it's useful to know it. But when you're basing your claims to, in effect, justice now, to equality now, on bad things that have happened to you in the past, or bad things that have happened to your ancestors in the past. I mean, you know, think about it this way. You know, Marx, the whole goal, right? Communist Manifesto is what? Is that, you know, it's from each according to his needs, right? Or to each according to his needs, from each according, you know, to his abilities. It's not what's become the kind of current motivist. The current motivist is like, you know, we're replacing as the key to social justice, socialism with a kind of, you know, unusually progressive and ambitious program of tort reform. You know, but Marx could never have imagined, right, that the author, someone who said from each according to his ability, you know, to each according to his needs, couldn't have anticipated the degree to which at this point right now, to each according to his ability to establish a right of restitution with respect to property stolen from his ancestors would become a battle cry, not of the revanchist right, which is always trying to reclaim stuff that was stolen from his ancestors, but the supposedly progressive left. And that's, to me, you know, Adolf has started saying a lot a couple of years ago, both in our conversations, but also more generally, that what we need as a kind of rallying point is just the idea of the public good. One of the triumphs of neoliberalism is that it's more or less eliminated the idea of the public good from our public discourse. But the point of the public good is that, you know, when we want people to have jobs, we don't want them to have jobs because it satisfies some claims upon the past and their property rights in the past. We want them to have good jobs because it's part of the public good.
Okay, so
Thank
again,
you.
No. I'm gonna ask. Oh yeah, Gabriel, feel free to say stop anytime you can't take it anymore. But I'm gonna ask the same question that I asked when we have bitch ass Bree on. When we have who the fuck is asking for this? Now I know we've asked for like a streamlined version of affirmative action, but what Black people or people of color, as you fuckers like to use, are saying, hey, we just want Black jobs. No white jobs, just Black jobs. We just want some Black jobs. Oh no. I live in Watts and it's 65% Hispanic and 30% Black. But no, I just want Black jobs. Fuck them. Like, who is saying this? Where are these conversations happening?
In his head. I mean, he basically sounds like Archie Bunker. If you really decode what he said. He's like, you know, these people, they come here and they want what I've worked hard for, sitting in his, you know, comfortable chair. And he hasn't earned anything. Where's the proof? He has to start with some the job I have, I earned, and you're trying to come for it and you don't deserve it. That's the subtext of everything he's saying. He's a straight up Archie Bunker dude who looks like Steven Spielberg, and that's really the only difference. To me, it's like this. It's really, it goes right back to what Killmonger was saying before. It's this, we're at the end of history, except he's literally then talking about like back over here is okay, but not over there. Like he's drawing a whole new map as if we're supposed to just agree with whatever he's saying. Like it's like we're all friends here. They recognize that it's performative, and the performance is, let's look at these people, talk about some stuff, and talk about people we like Marx, and we're just all going to feel like we had kind of a socialist experience, whatever that means. I mean, I can't. It's like I was just talking to a friend of mine earlier today who was like, I'm not going to be able. She does work with the community organization. I'm not going to name any names, but she's like, these DSA white boys, I can't. I'm not going to work with these people anymore because of them. And I'm like, what do you mean? And she's like, they don't. Their agenda is just to talk about themselves, and you can't get anything done. There's no doing anything. They are tools. They're they're basically the they're the tools that what we would call rednecks and crackers were 50 years ago. They're just they're just mucking up the works while other people are advancing the real agenda.
Mud, you got anything? You've been quiet.
Yeah, I mean, they talk about this as if like we are under some Marxist government, like we have to adhere to their understanding of Marx. But they have not achieved their goal of actually gaining power to be saying anything of the sort. I mean, we live under the American government, which gives us the right to petition the government for redress. I mean, that's the First Amendment. If we're going to have a conversation about how this affects the public good, knowing that the government can be held accountable for violating your rights is essential to the public good. I mean, it's kind of like, I'm sorry?
Oh, I just said it's at the heart of it.
Yeah, and it's kind of like what Josiah is saying. Like, if you're just saying we're going to erase history, like, then you're just giving like the government free reign to violate your rights, and as long as they ignore your issue long enough, eventually they could say, well, that's the past. So no, we're not going to allow this shit to to go this way. We're not going to agree to this. And like I've been saying, like they're just not paying attention to what is really happening in our politics. They're living in some fantasy world because they need the black vote and they aren't getting it. And it's obvious why they aren't getting it, because they're not speaking to our issues because they want to ignore our issues.
Right.
Well, for me, this kind of feels like Southern strategy-ish, because I'm seeing this consistent push.
It is. No, it is. It's just a different kind of dog whistle. Keep going. I'm gonna pull in that fucking video, but it's the same thing. You can't say nigga. And now it's not force busting or states' rights. It's white fragility. It's reparations. It's race reductionism. Go ahead, please, Josiah.
That's exactly
please, Killmonger. Kill.
It's these dog whistles on the left that I'm picking up on, and it's like basically they're saying you don't have to listen to those Negroes. We can do this without them. We'll give them some platitudes, but that's it. The only thing we ask of you is don't be rude. But we will not do anything to meaningfully change the racial hierarchy.
Give me that Robin DiAngelo nice racism that she's talking about that you motherfuckers hate.
Exactly. And none of you people have read the book. I get really frustrated with everyone who says, oh, I've seen a few excerpts. Why is it that Matt Taibbi and the rest of you clowns, you know who you are, I've only read excerpts. But y'all read Das Kapital and all this other stuff, though. Y'all had time for that.
They didn't read that shit either.
It's all clip notes.
And one more thing I wanted to ask, like, why are we talking about Marx if history doesn't matter? Isn't he dead?
Man.
And he was a whole fucking racist. So can we stop having to deal with old ass racists? So I gotta deal with fucking 19-year-old racists and dead ass racists too. Y'all killing a bitch. Like y'all killing me fucking for real. God damn.
White people, Marx is not as impressive as you think he is. He's really not. He's only saying the same basic bullshit that black people have been telling you since we got here. Hey, slavery is wrong. What do you know? The people who do the work to get the proceeds from their labor.
No, but he always saw us as the bottom caste. Ask Mud. Didn't he always see us as being like a bottom base kind of labor?
I know, but like my point is like white people needed to go to Marx for these ideas. And I'm like, your fellow Americans have been telling you this the whole time.
It's a hot mess.
Just don't hit the same when you're black.
This conversation is really important. It also has to, we have to keep saying to whoever's watching this, the foundation is reparations. That the place you have to start from to really peel this onion back and understand why, because we're at where we're at through, I'm here because of literally years of education where I've had the sense or the good accident, however it happened, hit my head at a young age to listen to black folks. And so I have some idea of what we're talking about, and I continue to listen. So I have some sense. You have to start with redress. If we form a company and you're like, where'd you get this money to start this company? And I'm like, oh, I murdered my uncle and I took this from his house. It's like, okay, you know what? I don't know that I want to start a company with you. You're like murdering your uncle and stuff. That doesn't seem like a good idea. The corporation that is this country is based on criminal behavior. We are a criminal enterprise. You will not get different results from a structure built on a rotten foundation. And that's not a metaphor. It's true business management. I mean, whatever you're into, religious organizations.
Oh, they about to bring that. They're gonna bring that up. You got ahead of us, Gabriel. They about to bring up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
For everybody to have a good job. It has nothing to do with the history. So to me, the minute someone tells you, I mean, my God, the single most uttered phrase on the left is, the problem until we come to terms with our racist, sexist, capitalist, whatever, until we come to terms with our history, we can never do anything. Unless it is completely the opposite of truth. We should stop worrying about coming to terms with our history, which is in every respect about this, like everybody else's history, bad, and come to terms instead with what the requirements are.
So this is that Baki case shit, right? Where it's just like everybody has the same history. Tell me when there was a genocide of workers. When was there a genocide? When did they round up workers in this country and enslave them, beat them, send their children? Enslave them, beat them, send their children across the country, rape their wives. Like, when did that happen in this country? When was there a genocide of workers? I'm not talking about the labor scuffles where some people died. I'm talking about like a real genocide of just workers.
You know what a good
When did that happen in this country?
So the summer of 1919, things were getting really hot in America on a lot of different levels, right? And so there were organizers who were going out telling people, you got to form unions, you got to fight for your right to vote and stuff like that. And there were black folks saying, treat us like everyone else. The union organizers did go to jail, and it's called the Red Scare of 1919, all that stuff. So you can see, and it's really sad because, it's sad to go to jail, especially if it happens in large numbers and it impacts community. Black people died. And this is like all over the country in riots, the most horrific ways imaginable. And then the federal government was like, we're going to investigate some black people because we think they must have started this. So you've got to compare it. You can literally say, well, how are workers treated versus black folks kind of generally? Jail, riots, murdered by riots, and then blamed for getting murdered. We're going to prosecute you for murdering yourself.
Of what is called the Black Belt or the Black Metropolis. Significantly for us, by the time of the riots, the stockyards employ about 40,000 people, 12,000 are African Americans. So whatever misgivings the packing bosses had about employing African Americans, about the possibility of violence on the floor, that is all faded now with the arrival of this very large, mostly unskilled, and largely low-paid workforce. So Fitzpatrick and Foster think this is the perfect time to push things forward, to create a union that has diversity in ethnic terms, national terms, racial terms, organizing men and women together, skilled and unskilled. And so in 1916, they inaugurate what is called the Stockyards Labor Council. And initially, the union has a great deal of success. So that's Fitzpatrick speaking to a huge meeting of meatpacking workers. This is in what's called Packing Town, which is in the Stockyards district. This is the area described by Sinclair in the jungle. So you can see the enormity of the crowds. This is also a mass campaign that's organizing everyone. So one of the first things they do is hire and train a cadre of black organizers. They have someone writing for the Chicago Whip, which is a black newspaper. The union very aggressively pursues grievances filed by African-American workers, especially those about racial discrimination. And the high point for the SLC comes in 1917. So this is during World War I, and the SLC feels sufficiently empowered to threaten a strike if their demands aren't met. And because it's during wartime, the government basically freaks out and appoints a judge to mediate the dispute. And the lawyer working for the union, Frank Walsh, calls a number of African Americans to the stand. They discuss the low wages, the poor conditions, but they also discuss the discrimination they've suffered. And Walsh gives this very stirring oration saying, from this point on, the white man's unions are going to show that they're loyal to the rights of the black man as they are to the white man. And the mediator grants the union full recognition, a wage increase, equal pay for men and women, protection from racial discrimination, among other things. So a full victory for the union. It's estimated that about 90% of white workers and 50% of black workers join the Stockyards Labor Council. So if this union was such a success, the question then becomes, why only 50% of the black workers? So there's a few problems with the SLC that we can trace directly back to 1904 and then trace directly forward to 1919. If you recall the legacy of the 1904 strike, the idea of black workers being suspicious of unionism as being primarily for white people only, that they'd be violently sort of chased out of a union, that their rights would not be protected. White workers feeling that African Americans are perhaps not fit for unionism, that they don't have solidarity, these sort of racist stereotypes. All of this comes back into play. So for one thing, for obscure jurisdictional reasons that I won't get into, lest we all fall asleep, the SLC is technically not allowed to organize everybody into one union. They can't technically do that because of their charter. So the way that they circumvent this is by organizing people through neighborhoods. And the idea of this is it would strengthen the union by tying it to people's ethnic and religious communities. So the idea is if you are a Lithuanian immigrant, you live in the Lithuanian neighborhood, you're in a Lithuanian union. So the people you see at work, at the union hall, at the saloon, on your street corner, right? These are all the same people. So you have a greater sense of solidarity. The problem with this, as I'm sure several of you are already considering, is that Chicago is one of the most segregated cities in America. And so the union that represents the Black Belt area, which is Local 651, is by default essentially a de facto segregated union, and inevitably comes to be known as Colored Local 651, or in less charitable moments, the Jim Crow Local. So African Americans chafe immediately at this idea that they're being forced into essentially a segregated union local. There's also issues of the black workers themselves. So the majority of members of the SLC, black members of the SLC who stick around, who are very active in the union, are native-born Chicagoans. For migrants from the South, they have very little experience with unions, and what little they do is extremely negative, even more exclusionary and violent than unions in the North. So they would not necessarily have been enthusiastic about joining the union, and in fact were not, especially because with the advent of the Great Migration, there are a number of community-based alternatives to unionism. So this is a card from the Urban League that was widely circulated among recently arrived black migrants. So you have the Urban League, the Wabash Avenue YMCA, countless numbers of churches, fraternal organizations, things like that are serving a lot of the same purposes that a union would. So things like securing employment, mediating workplace disputes, purchasing things like disability insurance, the like, that a union could serve, right? Those are the same things a union can do, but this is a black organization that is specifically assisting the black community, and you don't have to deal with things like a de facto segregated local area. You don't have to deal with paternalistic white leadership. The response of the union, too, it should be noted, is pretty cold to all of this. So when black members complain about Local 651 being a de facto segregated local, they are told by union leadership that actually it's better for them to have their own organization with their own leaders. When the black workers say, no, it's actually not what they want, the leadership essentially says, yes, it is what you want. There's even Fitzpatrick, who's generally very progressive, especially for his time on racial issues, responded to low membership among the African-American community by saying, the poor, deluded, colored, non-union man allows himself to be exploited by the packers to the detriment of his own fellow Negroes and to the great injury of the white worker too. So trucking in a lot of these very ugly racist stereotypes about African-Americans being almost servile and not really fitting into the vision of the union. So one thing we know about the race riot of 1919 is that it is not an event that occurs fully spontaneously, that this is something that had been building for several months and even years. The thing that is always cited here, the bombings of black homes that occur starting in 1917. The same thing happens on the shop floor in the stockyards. So in testimony before the federal mediator in the summer of 1919, it's recalled that gangs of white union workers would wait outside the stockyards gates, and if any black worker came out without a union button, he'd be hit over the head and shoved back inside and told, don't come out until you sign a card. Another case where a union worker physically threatened a non-union worker, and the non-union black worker beat him into unconsciousness with a pipe. Workers regularly coming to work with revolvers and knives concealed in their clothes for fear of a race war in the stockyards. So when the riot finally occurs, it's sort of the culmination of a lot of these tensions and a lot of this anger that's been seething for a couple of years now. So the riot itself, which we know explodes in July 1919 with the murder of Eugene Williams and the refusal of police to arrest his killer. This leaves 38 people dead, lasts for 8 days, consumes much of the South Side in particular. There are a couple of things about the riot that are significant, though, from a labor perspective. So one is, unlike contemporaneous riots, I'm thinking of Springfield, Illinois in 1908, in East St. Louis in 1917, and Tulsa in 1921. These other riots are more like massacres, or pogrom would probably be the best word, in which whites are trying to chase African Americans out of the city. In the Chicago race riot, there are pitched battles back and forth between white and black citizens. So one thing that sociologists cite here is that no women are killed during the riot, that this is almost a war, essentially, between white and black, with casualties on both sides. So that's going to make the rebuilding of the city much more difficult, because they're seen by both sides as being aggrieved, that both sides are going to be seeking justice or even vengeance. The other thing is that 41% of the injuries sustained during the riot and several deaths are in what's called the Stockyards District. So this is, north is pointing this way. This is a map from I think this is the Tribune, where you can see the stockyards over there. A bit toward the east is what's called the Black Belt, and then in between are the neighborhoods of Canaryville and Bridgeport, which are Irish American neighborhoods that African Americans had to cross to get to work, which are very hostile to African Americans. So the very act of going to work was kind of taking your life in your hands. So there's a very close connection now between the racial violence of the riot and the idea of going to work. So it's clear that work and labor is going to play a central role in how this is ultimately going to be resolved. The resolution from labor's perspective is that all of this is a product, again, of divisions created artificially by bosses. So during the riot, the CFL, the Chicago Federation of Labor, opens a soup kitchen that's open to black and white workers 24 hours a day. It publishes a very bold editorial saying that white workers have not only a responsibility to refrain from violence, but to prevent violence from being visited upon black citizens, as they say, not because the unions had anything to do with starting the present trouble, but because of their advantageous position to help end it. And it's a bit difficult to tell because the records don't have a box for a union member for each of the police reports, but based on what we can piece together, it does seem like union members did not participate in the violence in very large numbers, that the union kind of restrained its members. So the riot ends on August 3rd, and the big question remaining is, what's going to happen, right? What's going to happen when the stockyards reopen, when all of these people, black and white, are put back into the same place, the same rooms in some areas, some of them with axes and knives, right? So the union, not surprisingly, blames this on employers. So this is a pamphlet that was widely circulated after the riot. There's a lengthy piece in there by the secretary of the Chicago Federation of Labor that blames all of this on employers, right? That what they've done is set white against black in a battle over pay and conditions and things like that. Famously, the heads of the CFL want J. Ogden Armour charged with conspiracy to commit murder. That doesn't go anywhere, as you can imagine. But they clearly feel that the race riot is purely a product of the divisions created by packing bosses and the like. So on Thursday, August 7th, this is the kind of flashpoint that would really shatter this tenuous alliance, or what's left of it. The Packers announced their plan. They're going to reopen the stockyards with militia and police inside the stockyards to preserve order, make sure there's no further violence. The union responds to this with fury, the union meaning union leadership, simply because of the long history of police and especially militia being used to break strikes, and especially in Chicago. There's a very, very bloody history going well back into the 19th century of militia being used against strikers. And one union organizer says, "My men don't want to work with a Boy Scout with a bayonet right behind them," sort of mocking the militia. And in a bit more ominous tone says, "5 days of race riots have our white workers alarmed and inflamed, and we don't know how much longer we can control them." Their solution to this is to say, keep the militia and the police out of the stockyards, and we, the union, will reopen them and will be responsible for security. We will keep order. Black workers respond to this with incredulity, as you can imagine. So Robert Abbott of the Defender says, "We confess that our experience with organized labor in this locality has not been reassuring," and says that this is a very foolish plan, and that in fact black workers actually would prefer the militia and police to remain, which is not surprising. They've just been through 8 days of rioting where you have people driving through the Black Belt firing indiscriminately into houses. Most damningly, the black union Local 651, publicly slams this plan as being contrary to their own interests, saying this is a malicious attempt to prevent members of our race from returning to their places of employment, and we demand every means of protection that we as law-abiding citizens should receive. So this ultimately shatters this tenuous alliance between white and black workers. In response, 15,000 white workers walk out of the stockyards. Their main demand is that the militia and police be removed from the workplace, but there are also several complaints about black workers in particular. So some of the demands include their anger at, quote, the intention of the Packers to disrupt the unions by the use of non-unionized colored labor, a demand that the Packers choose once and for all between white and colored employees. And so as the Daily News puts it, this is very clearly a double protest against the presence in the yards of military and police and the readmittance to the yards of colored workers. So in labor history, this is what we call a hate strike. So this is a strike that is essentially against the presence of black workers here in the yards. The problem for Fitzpatrick in this case is that he can't disavow the strike because he wants the militia out too, but he can't support it because it's very clearly a strike that is directed against African American workers. The strike itself, compared to what we've talked about before, is actually relatively quiet. Nothing much happens. Most of the strikers come back within 4 days without achieving any of their goals. But as a byproduct of this, the SLC is essentially ended as an organizing body. And African Americans flee the union in large numbers, as you can imagine. The SLC makes one more last-ditch attempt to organize the stockyards and execute a strike in 1921 and 1922, but the strike is a complete failure, and it is broken largely through the use of black strikebreakers who have abandoned the union because the union, they feel, has abandoned them. So the things to take from this, I think, one is that the CFL did have some legitimately progressive goals. But the union was also tainted from its leadership all the way down to its membership on the shop floor by erroneous, very odd ideas, frankly, about black workers and their sense of solidarity and where they fit, ideas that ranged from insulting and paternalistic to toxic and violent. And because of this, leadership fooled themselves into believing that racial issues could be solved purely through labor action, which is simply not the case. And in a period where the black population of Chicago is growing rapidly and the racial consciousness of black Chicagoans is also growing rapidly, this appeal quickly held very little interest for black Chicagoans, and the union drive fell short. So I think that this sheds some light on the very wrong-headed attempts of the union to efface the racial aspects of a racial problem. And I think also shed some light on some of the larger reverberations of the race riot in terms of where it came from and where it led the city ultimately. Thank you.
I was going to just also point out that he says, people say we have to face our racist past in order to move forward, and the opposite is true. The opposite of that is either we have to not
continuing
racism
genocide for Black Americans,
or the opposite is we have to perpetuate. The actual opposite is of facing, not, if you're not going to face your racist past, you're going to promulgate it. That's literally what the opposite is.
Why is he acting like ignoring our racist past is going to change something for us, as if we haven't already been ignoring our racist past?
Because history doesn't matter. That's how he started off the whole conversation, but catch up.
I don't know if Mud's the one who's behind here, but right, exactly. It's like,
please let Mud keep going. I'm sorry, Mud. Please finish.
I'm just saying, like, that's essentially it. Like, it's not like this country has actually dealt with the past, disenfranchisement, enslavement, and rape, torture, lynchings. Like, it's never really dealt with any of that shit in any significant way. It's been symbolic. Right. I mean, so why are we, like, just because people talk about this stuff, like, especially in Black circles, is that what they're saying is happening? A conversation? Because I don't see any policy happening. I don't see any like levers of the government being flipped to give us resources or to like give us any form of power, like, in this country. So, and I haven't seen that in my lifetime, and I'm pretty sure my parents haven't seen it in their lifetime. My
Baldwin did it. You sounded like Baldwin. I have never seen it.
So, like, yeah, I mean, look, I don't know. It's just frustrating because they're not dealing with any form of our reality. Like, they're just creating their own reality.
Mud, this wasn't for you. That's why. This is for white people, so they have excuses so when they no longer
read the
involved
comments,
in the movement.
man. The comments are terrible.
Like, this is what they do. This is what Adolph Reed does. This is what Bree Joy Gray does. This is their job. They give white people arguments to not get involved with the anti-racist project in America. Oh, well, you don't want to do reparations? Well, here are the arguments you can use. Well, we have to unite amongst class lines first.
Yeah, it's so important what you're saying. Yeah.
And Gerald Horne even said that to Bree. Every time that happens, it ends up being white people uniting to fuck Negroes. He didn't use the word fuck, but
he should have.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And it's good. Like, I hear you say that, and it reminds me that it takes a lot of work to maintain the dysfunction in this country. This is not natural. Even as crazy and as challenged as white folks are because of the pathologies that we're raised up with, we would not naturally continue to perpetuate. So you need people doing this kind of work, what they're doing right now, so that those angry DSA kids can look at that and then go to a meeting and be like, well, a rising tide lifts all boats and Bernie was right and blah, blah, blah. They need that dose. It's like, you can't, they haven't figured out how to genetically modify people to be idiots yet. You still have to give them a shot every week or every so often or whatever.
Hey, yo, I don't know what's going on.
Just jump in and say hi, John, and just say hi, and we're gonna go back to playing the video. So just say hi to everybody, and we'll queue up the video, and you can jump in on the next. You can be first once we stop the video.
I was gonna let you know, like, I know what's going on, but I don't know. I know exactly what the fuck going on.
Yeah,
I know what's
just
going on.
Just say hi to everybody, John.
What up, everybody? What's up? This is John C. Man, I'm here, and yeah, I seem like everybody grilling here. I see Gabe is here.
Yeah,
good to see you.
Yeah,
Gabe. Cousin Mud. What's up, Cousin Mud? Joey. What's
it was
up,
so
Joey?
bad. I had to get into the white. I had to call the white reserves. I was like, what? Gabriel was like, I forgot I gave you my number.
I was at Cracker Barrel having a nice time. And my people went off to
Gabriel, let me tell you. The last time I went to Cracker Barrel, I went in Vegas. I went to Cracker Barrel in 7 states. Vegas ruined it. I may never eat there again. It was the nastiest, most Cracker Barrel cracker.
It was the most crackery of your Cracker Barrel.
It was a lot of crackers in there. It was a lot of crackers.
Let me tell you. If I was a Southern white lady, I would have walked in the kitchen and slapped the cook.
Listening to Reset Race, you're now tuned in to Reset Race. You're listening to Reset Race, you're now tuned in to Reset Race. Put them back on the grill again, we grilling them. Put them back on the grill again, we grilling them. Put them back on the grill again, we grilling them. Back on the grill again, we grilling them. You're listening to Reset Race. ADOS need reparations to make America great. You're tuned in to Reset Race. We no longer starving while others eat off our plate. No. You're listening to Reset Race. We focused on our justice claim. We know what is at stake. You're tuned in to Reset Race. You'll find out who really about justice and really who fake. Lineage go back to US Southern plantations. Lineage, Jim Crow and mass incarceration. Redlining lynchings. We are old from this nation. You're not about justice if you ain't for reparations. MG the wise one. Cousin mother intellectual. Samantha bringing fire. Anti-black repressing you. No permanent friends and no permanent enemies. The backbone of the country. To win, you need our energy. You gon' see. Listening to Reset Race. You now tuned in to Reset Race. You're listening to Reset Race. You're now tuned in to Reset Race. Put them back on the grill again, we grilling them. Put them back on the grill again, we grilling them. Put them back on the grill again, we grilling them. Back on the grill again, we grilling them. You're listening to Reset Race. ADOS need reparations to make America great. You're tuned in to Reset Race. We no longer starving while others eat off our plate. No. You're listening to Reset Race. We focused on our justice claim. We know what is at stake. You're tuned in to Reset Race. You'll find out who really about justice and really who fake.
Until you do right by me, everything you think about is gonna crumble.
What is it you wanted me to reconcile myself to? I was born here almost 60 years ago. I'm not going to live another 60 years. You always told me it takes time. It's taken my father's time, my mother's time, my uncle's time, my brother's and my sister's time, my nieces and my nephew's time. How much time do you want for your progress?